Hello and welcome to Occult Book Review. This week's book is Heavenly Lights, The Apparitions of Fatima and the UFO Phenomenon, and it's by Dr. Joaquim Fernandes and Fina. Now, it's actually the first book in a trilogy, but I'll just focus on this book for now. The second book is Celestial Secrets, The Hidden History of the Fatima Cover-Up, and the third book in the trilogy is Fatima Revisited, and this particular book is a selection of essays on possible explanations for what the Fatima apparitions were, and it's by various experts in psychology, microwave radiation, the UFO phenomenon itself, and religion, I suppose. Okay, so we'll just take a look at the first book for now, though, Heavenly Lights. And the reason why I want to talk about it is because my own article about Fatima came out a few months ago, but it was republished when there was the anniversary of Fatima on the 13th of May this year. And what happened after that was I ended up talking to people on podcasts and interacting with people on Twitter about some things that were less well known about Fatima and still haven't really come to. If you don't know about Fatima, Fatima is a series of apparitions which took place in 1917 in Portugal, where a being described as a very small lady, 1 meter tall and bald and with black eyes, so very, very different to the Virgin Mary figure that you see in statues and whose image is venerated at Fatima today. The type of apparitions actually vary, and one of the first things I should mention is that the apparitions themselves were predicted months in advance. And they were predicted in quite a strange way, but a way that will be interesting to people watching these videos, in that a group of Portuguese, I suppose you call them channelers or spiritualists, were dabbling in automatic writing, and they felt really strongly that they were receiving an unusual transmission, if you want to call it that. This, I suppose you'd call it a voice or entity, called itself the Morning Star, and that becomes quite important later on. And it said that they should prepare themselves for strange events and that something incredible would take place. Now, after that, all went quiet for a while until 3 children began to say that they were receiving visits from this lady. I'll interrupt again and say there were also apparitions of what was called an angel at an earlier stage as well. Now, all of these things, when they're summed up in a religious context, became the basis for a site where it was said miracle healings took place and so on. But Fatima itself was associated with pagan deities long before then. What Dr. Fernandes and Fina bring in these particular books is original testimony. But even within that testimony, there are various contradictions. You're talking about very young children, and you're talking about priests and politicians with their own agendas. So you can see why there were inflections on Catholicism, on socialism, on the world itself. In 1917, don't forget, World War I was still taking place. So all of these messages get mixed up, even when you're looking at the original testimony, as I say. Now, Fatima itself is most famous then for the very final apparition, the miracle of the sun. And this book goes into all kinds of technical details. It examines witness statements from various angles. It goes into mathematical equations about light, about where certain people saw things and how that angle was seen by someone else. Basically, they kind of try to get a 3D representation of what this object was, because what is very clear is that the object wasn't the sun. The object that zigzagged its way down to Earth was seen by different people at different times, and it came from a cloud which moved over the sun, and then a being came from the orb, if you want to call it that, because so many people call it different things, a pearl-shaped globe, a silver cloud, a white cloud. And when the being went back into it, then that was when the kind of miracle took place, where people said they were healed, people said they felt heat, and I suppose the reason why it's such a famous case is because the estimates are that 50 to 80,000 people witnessed this. Even skeptics, journalists, people that went to laugh at the crowds who were flocking in a religious. What the authors go on to show is that when you look at the orthodox explanation of Fatima, it's very, very different to what was actually going on. Even the being herself, whoever she was 1 meter tall. I don't know whether you can see this particular picture. She was bald. When she spoke to the children, her lips never moved. They would hear her voice within a buzzing sound. She was carrying what was a globe to the children, which she seemed to manipulate as she spoke. Again, the words would appear in the children's heads, as opposed to seeing her mouth shape the words. Later on, I think it was in 1941, this globe was turned into a heart in all of the documentation. So she became much more of the mother of Jesus type of figure that we know and love so much. But initially she wasn't like that at all. What the authors go on to show in the book is that there are striking parallels between a lot of so-called UFO encounters and religious apparitions, and also, of course, fairy encounters, and even the kind of manifestation of the phenomena around them. So you could say, like, the angel hair falling down, the buzzing sound, the beings descending from a cloud, the platform of light, and also kind of strange messages, because the messages that the children received at Fatima in a popular context now don't seem to be the same messages that they initially transcribed, and this is shown in the book. When you look at the original documentation, the children actually seem sometimes unaware of who this person who this being is that they're interacting with, and it's only at the prompting of priests and politicians in the town that they kind of begin to put an identity upon. As I mentioned at the start, there was an earlier visitation as well, where the children were told to prepare for the apparitions. Now, I find it interesting that people ask, why children? Why would this being, if she really was that important, why would she want to give messages to illiterate children, and how could they be the receptacles for whatever this buzzing, maybe microwave form of transmission was? But it's not too distant from most occult rituals and cleansing when you think about it, because these children were living a very, very simple life. They didn't eat a lot. They so in that way they were kind of dieting well. They were praying all of the time and told to meditate. They were out in nature. So all of the things that you associate with preparing yourself to have an occult ritual, these children were inadvertently doing simply by fact of their lifestyle in the first place. So they were very pure in that way. They weren't contaminated by the processed foods that some people say affect meditation and occult transmissions today. Obviously, as children, they weren't affected by alcohol and the chemically filled cigarettes that we have today. So they were ideally placed to receive transmissions in a way that maybe adults weren't at the time. And today, of course, that could be argued is still the case. The later events after the miracle of the sun and what happened to the children is discussed in the second book in great detail, Celestial Secrets, and it shows the way that the messages that the children received from this being were changed, and they came out years later. And of course, this so-called secrets of Fatima as well were manipulated to be uh, secrets that the Catholic Church could manipulate, and to have that power. We know something that's going to happen, and you're not going to know. Indeed, the children ended up having very strange lives. Two died very young. Lucia then was basically taken away by the Jesuits and put in an order. She said that she was still receiving apparitions from time to time, but the first book also talks about the so-called fourth seer, who was another child in the village who said she was getting visits from an angel. So there's quite a lot of detail here. I found it frustrating actually that people are still writing about Fatima from the context of very early kind of Vallee and Ingo Swann, what would you say, angles, because we have much more documentation today. These were the first books that actually had access to the parochial records, so people shouldn't be quoting books from the 1970s because they're not accurate. They're books that kind of speculated about what Fatima was, but we can have much more. We can have a much better conversation and get as close to truth, if we can ever get close to truth when it comes to Fatima. But by looking at the original documentation, we're going to get there a lot quicker. My article from the Ancient Origins website will be posted in the comments section underneath this video, so you can have a look at kind of some of the parallels I've drawn between fairy lore and more detail into what actually happened on the day of the miracle of the sun. Another, I don't know whether you'd call it a coincidence or not, but I was just reading about Yeats and his channeling, which also happened in 1917. So that's kind of, I was talking to someone online and they're saying that sometimes an alignment of planets, or where the solar system is, can benefit communication, if you believe that kind of explanation. And that was why there was such strong transmissions that year. So have a look into that yourselves and see what you think. Thanks for watching, and I would really recommend people get these books, because as I said, it's frustrating to hear discussions about Fatima when people haven't actually read them. It's a bit like people talking about Gnostics and Gnosticism without acknowledging that the Nag Hammadi texts exist. These are the original parochial records in this book, and it's also an examination from all of the top minds in science, in psychology, and in religion and spirituality. So to ignore these books is an awful shame. Okay, so thanks a lot. That's my rant over. Bye.